in this Show Me Online teaching, and our goal is really to provide some practical ideas for online teaching and learning. So each episode we feature a guest teacher sharing a favorite lesson, and in writing project style, we work with activities and ideas that are adaptable across subject areas and grade levels. Today is Friday, and on Fridays, right now, we're really focusing on teacher self-care, something all of us need to attend to, we believe. And we're really fortunate to have Diane Mora with us to take us through about 30 minutes of how we might care better for ourselves. And so we also have some people behind the scenes, Casey Doherty in Reed Public School District, and Linda Brock in Blue Springs, Julie from the Missouri Writing Projects Network in Marceline, Missouri is with us. I'm Katie Klein from the Greater Kansas City Writing Project. And we have all kinds of other friends on this call. We're really glad you're here. What we encourage you to do is stay muted in this call and really use the chat feature to post questions, make comments, and connect with others who are on the call. I'm gonna mute myself and turn it over to Diane Mora. So go ahead, Diane. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Katie and Casey and Julie and everybody who invited me to spend some time with them today. I've worked in the field of education for about 15 years now, and prior to that, I studied and worked as a professionally trained certified chef. So anything I've learned about self-care has been gleaned by trial and error, largely error. My question for you today is, how are you really? And I'm going to practice some vulnerability here and answer audibly for those of you wondering if I'm for real about this. So if you were to ask me, how are you really? I'd say that 3 weeks ago, I felt like all of this was pretty much life as usual for me. I've intentionally lived alone for about the past 20 years. No husband, no kids any longer at home, no pets, only a garden in the summer to take care of. And I'm someone who has made extensive solitary and silent retreats, the longest being 30 days of silence and solitude at a monastery. But this week on Monday, something shifted for me, and I have just been really emotional. I suddenly felt as if a rug had been pulled out from under me. And oddly, my other friends and family were all saying to me that this was the first week that they felt like they had a routine going and that things were going okay. So I felt kind of hanging out by myself a little, to be feeling exactly the opposite. Part of it, as I sat with those feelings, was maybe a feeling of that I'm not being useful. I feel like I have things to contribute, but few avenues to contribute to them. Many of the things I rely on, even as a person who very much enjoys solitude, are no longer available to me. And I realize that I'm tired, I'm frustrated, and I even realize that I'm slightly angry about having to make do without them. The things that I'm talking about, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, but like Monday, I wanted a print on paper book because that's what I prefer to read. I didn't want to read another ebook. I just wanted paper. My house is exactly 1 block from a public library, and I wanted to make my usual walk to the library and lug home more books than I could read before the due date. And I desperately wanted mashed potatoes and gravy, but I didn't have any potatoes, fresh or instant. And I didn't think it was right to burden the grocery store clerks for 1 Idaho Spud just to satisfy my emotions. So in short, I wanted my life to be what it was before COVID-19, And all of my self-care mechanisms, I realized maybe not all of them, but a good many of them were going to have to change. So when I ask you today, how are you really? I'm really asking you. So for the next minute, I'm going to play a little background music, and if you'll chat with our other hosts, or just write yourself a note on paper. And I'd really like to know, how are you really? So 2 questions that I'm going to think about next are, and kind of walk through with you in terms of thought processes and maybe even some useful takeaways, are how am I going to get through this? And am I the only one who feels this way? So the biggest reason I feel thankful to Katie and Julie and Casey for asking me to do this today is because ever since Katie's invitation, I've had to really get clear with myself about the answers to these 2 questions. And think about where in my past experiences have I found the answers, or at least some guidance. And maybe with some luck, what I'm about to share about self-care during times of great transition will resonate with you. So how am I going to get through this? Well, whatever your this is, maybe your this is, how am I going to get through another night of making dinner for 6? Or how am I or my spouse going to find another job? Or how am I going to get the kids to be quiet long enough to host this Zoom meeting with my boss? Or something even more devastating, like the death of a relative or a close friend. Everybody's this is different. The next slide, remember, I cautioned you that not every one of my self-care comforts will be your kind of self-care.
Diane, I think your screen share isn't on right now, if you want to turn that on so we can see your slides.
Oh, sorry guys. Really?
While that's happening, I just want to note some of the chat, Diane, is many people are still feeling some of the same things that you were sharing with us, like the rug being pulled out, maybe just a pit living in our stomach, moving from capable to incapable in a matter of 10 minutes, you know, not liking working from home. on good days, things, even on a good day, something might trigger an emotion. And, you know, grieving between things that are lost and the joy for new things found, like just this space in between those things. So I just wanted to share with you, I don't know if you were reading the chat, but as we move forward, those are some of the things that are on the minds of those of us on the call.
Terrific. Thanks for sharing that with me, Casey, because I'm not following the chat. So I appreciate hearing that and bringing me up to speed. So as I thought about what do I have that I use as self-care activities, that some of my typical ones are not possible right now. Others I can modify, and still others are just going to have to be off the table for a while. But one of my how am I going to get through this things is obviously real print on paper books. I don't feel right burdening delivery drivers right now to bring one copy of a book to my door. And so I'm currently on a quest to find a friend who can loan me a copy of Carl Sagan's Contact, if anybody's out there. I haven't had any luck yet, but it's turning into a pleasant challenge and a great reason to reach out to friends. So if you have a copy, please write that in the chat and let me know where I can find you. I'm also, some of my previous, self-care are libraries. Obviously that's going to have to come off the list. I love libraries. I love the quiet. I love the smell. I love knowing that I'm standing or sitting surrounded by great minds and great thinkers. And, that is definitely one I can't access other than digitally. Other than the classroom, my yoga studio was my most regular interaction with a community of folks. And honestly, it took me years of just training myself at home from videos before I even had the courage to attend a live yoga class. And now all I have is going back to my digital viewing. So Tuesday was a full 7 days since I'd set foot in a grocery store. So among other things I purchased fresh, I finally got my mashed potatoes and gravy. That's just a childhood thing that always seems to bring me comfort. I don't know what yours is, but your comfort food is, but you might drop it in the chat and let us know if you're still indulging. Walking is definitely on my self-care. I say that I take long walks, but they're really quite aimless. And I'm really, really grateful right now for the sunshine and the warmer weather. So yeah, walking, definitely. Volunteering is on my self-care list, and that might, for some of us, seem counterintuitive. And the reason it's asterisked is because volunteering is something that I don't typically have the energy to do it when I'm teaching full time. I just don't have it in me. But I'm currently volunteering at a local food pantry 2 days a week. And so volunteering is definitely on my self-care list. It helps me alleviate those feelings that I am just not being useful. And on my self-care list is Rose, my sweet 15-month-old granddaughter who lives in California with my lovely daughter, Rachel, her husband, Michael, and the dog, Rolf. If we have time, maybe we'll come back and I'll show you a really cute video of Rose, but unless I suddenly start getting flooded with chats that, yeah, we want to see Rose. And this is hard for me, probably where I become the most emotional, because with them being in California, ever since Rose was born, I have not gone more than about 6 weeks without making a visit out to California to see her. And I'm definitely grieving the loss of those hugs. FaceTime just doesn't deliver that. So on my list, the last thing of self-care is letting myself experience grief and tears. And that's hard for me to indulge in publicly, and it's hard for me to admit publicly. But having been a hospice volunteer for many years, I know that these are two very important parts of self-care that we really don't even like to talk about. We need to demonstrate, find a place or a way to demonstrate and acknowledge that we are finding grief or experiencing grief. And if you're much of a C.S. Lewis fan, he has a small book called sorry, my mind is on Rose. A Grief Observed. And the very first line of that essay is what really speaks to everything I know about grief and about much of, I think, where we're at right now. And the line is, "No one ever told me how much grief feels like fear." And it's really, really hard to separate those two emotions because they do feel they leave us, fear and grief both seem to leave us with that sense that the world has been upended. So enough about me and my self-care. Take a moment. What's on your comfort list or your self-care list? Or what do you want to add to our chat or to your journal right now?
As people are writing, keep writing, but I just also wanted to share some of the things that are going on in the chat. Comfort food, chocolate, socials, online socials. Those are some of the things people are experiencing. Mentioning this opportunity to name all of these items, what we're thinking and what we're feeling, but also what the comforts are, naming those very specifically. It's not just food, it's mashed potatoes and gravy. So being able to name that, the happy hours with friends, not having to clean the house for that. Yeah, that's good, Katie. Playing with dogs, painting birdhouses, baking bread. Those are some of the things that are coming up. Oh, eating lunch outside. I have done that numerous times. I'm so happy we are at a place when I can eat lunch outside on my work day occasionally. So yes, thank you all for sharing some of those.
Terrific. Yeah. So, Sweetie, now that we've thought about our comforts, I'm still thinking about, this time of, am I the only one who feels this way? And I have a feeling that many of us ask ourselves this question from time to time. And as I thought about how I would answer that, the idea of books came to my mind. Books help me discover that I may not be the only person on the planet who feels a certain way. And that can be comforting when it comes to strong or difficult emotions. And sometimes it's just a matter of reading something because you're wondering if anyone else has actually lived your circumstance. And when you find that author who's willing to share that, there's a sense of community there. reading books, literally, and I don't mean that as a pun, saved my life. And with the help of a licensed therapist, books helped me overcome a life-threatening depression in my 30s. I've never talked about this publicly before, but I was 20 minutes away from implementing a plan to end my life when my sister-in-law, now friend, intervened. And books were a big part of that healing process. As a child, books and the library were my escape from home life. In adolescence and early adulthood, books were what I turned to as part of that emotional healing. And so, of course, for self-help today, I'm going to recommend books, or self-care, I guess I really should say. This picture that you're looking at, these are the 10 books I would take to a deserted island. I've even created a handy link for you to access later if you're curious about all the titles and why. So Julie, I don't know if you can drop, or Katie, can you drop that link into the chat? But just so you know I'm for real, there's the book list. It's probably not what you think, but top of my list. So it goes in order of the pictures that you'll see, and it's a Google Doc, so feel free to have a look at that. I gotta get back to my screen. So, books. If you've got books that you want to talk about, I would encourage you to drop the title and the author into the chat, and think about this in terms of what book do you take to your deserted island? There's no internet there, so you're going to have to think about, can you get it on paper? And my co-producers, as they're seeing titles, will definitely want to shout those out.
Well, I just want to share that Danielle has shared, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings saved my life. I think that book has saved a lot of people's lives, or brought us ways to help other people. So Danielle, that's a fantastic idea. And Diane, I wrote in the chat, but I know that you couldn't see it. I love this idea of creating a book list of like critical books right now. I think that's something I'm going to share at one of my virtual socials.
Thanks. I had fun putting it together. It was hard. There are a few close contenders that I'd still like to add to the list, but I figured 10 was a good number to stop myself at. Okay. If you're not seeing any other titles right now, or...
Yeah, another mention is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for bringing joy. That's a fun one. Welcome the Unwelcome. I'm not familiar with that book. That's one Casey mentioned, and she said it provides space for her. A Passionate Journey. Don Quixote. What a great idea, Jan. That's fabulous. And Katie says, I need poetry. I agree. That's fantastic. Those are all great. I haven't thought enough about this. I'm going to think about this.
Terrific. Well, I appreciate those recommendations. Katie Klein, were you able to drop that link into the chat if anybody wanted my list? Great. Okay, thanks. So I thought some more about books too, and more about self-care. And of course, that sweet little face you're looking at there, that's Rose. And I thought about, there are so many good books that I would never put on my deserted island book list, but they still had something to offer. And the quote that I'm going to share with you here in a second is an example. It's from a pop culture psychology book called Switch. And some of you may have read it, and there's nothing inherently wrong with the book. It may be one that you would take to a desert island. It's just simply not my usual genre. But I was asked to read it for a PD, and this quote that I'm going to show you gave me an aha moment for me as a teacher and as a human being. And it really speaks to me right now, especially because it's the most basic underlying reason, I think, for why we need to have grace with others and grace with ourselves. And I think right now we all need grace. So as you read this quote to yourself, I'm going to put it up here in a second. Please remember, when you see the word people, I'm people, you're people, you are people too, and then feel free to drop a reaction in the chat box. And there's change swirling around everybody right now. We're dumped right in the midst of it. And I do think we are wearing ourselves out.
So far in the chat, we're seeing a couple of, well, me, Casey, we both have said we've heard this from people and that we agree mental fatigue is causing us to resist maybe. But I want to also say, I think it's because of what you said earlier, Diane, that we have to have space to grieve for what we've lost before we can actually be really good at moving forward. So I think that's kind of at the heart of this as well.
And I really appreciate this quote. It's helpful to me as I think about, I'm not getting as much done as I want to get done, or as much as I feel like I should be getting done. So this, I just maybe, I wrote it down on my notebook. I need to keep going back and reading it, that it's not because I'm lazy. It could be because of mental exhaustion. We're doing a lot of different things that we aren't aware of, I don't think.
Thanks, Katie. And both, and Linda too. I definitely was hoping that this would create a space for us to recognize within ourselves as part of self-care that we are flexing our mental muscles right now in so many different ways. Everything has changed. And when we're gentle with ourselves, we can be gentle with other people. So if I'm not able to give you much of a gift today, I hope that it is this reminder to be gentle with yourself. And this importance of comfort when you're facing uncertainty. And that is my sweet little Rose facing her first doctor visit that she could stand on her own 2 feet for. I think sometimes we can take a real lesson in self-help from our little ones. And you might notice, if you look closely, that Big Bunny is anchored very securely in Rose's arm over here. And so that list that I shared with you of my comforts, even though some of them are really not that deep, you know, they're my big bunny. And I hope that today maybe has been if nothing else, a reminder for you that it doesn't matter what your big bunny is, that they're important and they're important to you. My last thought to leave you with is from a book that is on my deserted island list, Transitions, Making Sense of Life Changes by William Bridges. And he says, find the little continuities that are important when everything else seems to be changing. And in the book, he uses this story to illustrate this very, very basic concept of self-care. He talks about the experience of a friend whose elderly mother insists on going to the grocery store within minutes of moving to a new home in a new town. And the mother's insistence that they go to the grocery store is because she had to purchase bananas for the girl's father. And the bananas were out of season, they were expensive. It just was not a logical thing to do right in the moment. But as he says in the book, quote, but in a situation where everything else in their lives had changed, it was important to hold on to a few continuities, like your favorite food or a schedule of familiar TV programs, end quote. So sometimes it is the little things, right? And as we close, I hope you enjoy listening to Sinead O'Connor's Healing Room, using the chat to ask questions or answer the questions we started with. You know, what's on your list of ways to take care of yourself? Has anything changed on that list from how you gave yourself self-care in the past? Do some things have to come off or be adjusted? What have you added or what are you experimenting with? And while you're chatting and thinking about that, I'm going to sign off while you listen, and I'm going to enjoy a long walk, a good book, and a bowl of steaming hot mashed potatoes with gravy. Thanks for joining me today.
Diane, as that's playing and we're closing, there are so many people thanking you for this opportunity today, just to ponder all of these things and begin to name them for us. The chat room is full, talking about things that Amy mentioned, things that she's missing, or daily affirmations and being connected to people. Feels like we can spend so much time working and isolated on our computers, but yet not really feel productive. So everyone is just really thinking about the things that you've asked us to today, and thanking you, of course. One person writes, I often think of what causes me to overcome fatigue. And for me, it is interactions with others, even though as an introvert, I am charged by human interaction. Thinking about, you know, those who are in abusive relationships right now and what their minds are enduring, and how we're just being pushed into new spaces. So, and again, just to thank you to you for your honesty and for your vulnerability to help us get into that honest and vulnerable space in ourselves. So, Katie, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you, Diane. If you missed it, Diane was playing for us Sinead O'Connor's Healing Room. If you haven't heard it, it's a great song. So you can go out there to YouTube and play it for yourself. We're at the end of our time here today. Diane, sometimes I forget, and then you reminded me how just modeling that vulnerability helps uplift other people. So doing the work for us in some ways makes us feel like we were able to do it with you. I hope that makes sense. It's certainly how I feel. So I really appreciate what you brought us today. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back again on Monday at 2 o'clock. Our guest teacher on Monday is Corinne Ahrens. So she'll be here to share an online teaching activity with us. And I hope you can come back and join us. Also, you can visit, all these are recorded, all these episodes are recorded, and they are up finally on our Missouri Writing Project Network YouTube channel. So you can go there and check them out. Until then, I hope that everybody has a great Easter. Take good care of yourselves and everyone around you, and goodbye.